Hello, everybody. What's going on? My name is Joseph. I'm your low budget host of the day. Uh, I'm going to make a couple announcements before I get started this video. The first announcement is I'm going to start varying up what I am covering in videos. I will continue to do the occasional album review, but I'm also interested in covering other topics. Likely going to be covering some political topics. Going to be covering news mostly. So political topics will be covered inside the news itself. Um, and I also want to kind of talk about a little bit of history too. And since history and politics go together pretty well, it shouldn't be too difficult to pull off. I also want to talk about weather because I feel like weather gets overlooked all the time. And I wish it wouldn't because there are some weather topics that also can get somehow shoehorned into politics. So that should be interesting to see how that gets pulled off, but trust me, it will eventually. Um, the other thing I want to talk about is I'm going to start advertising myself more out on social media and out on just different platforms in general. I'm hoping that generates a few more views. And yeah, that's about all I got to say. So here we go. So my formula is going to be pretty simple when I'm covering news topics. The formula is I'm going to cover local news, state news, and national news. Local news will probably not always be where I'm living. It won't always be where I live. Um, where I live doesn't really post a lot of really good news stories, if we're going to be honest. I mean, they do, but it might end up being weather news if it is where I live, because that's the best news I've got from where I live. And it will probably be city council news, because that's always interesting. At least to me, it is sometimes, even though it shouldn't be. But anyway, the other thing that I'm going to cover, state news, is instant always going to be where I live. I will probably cover other states over my own, only because my own state doesn't always post news, and whatever news I do get is run by not well balanced news organizations. I know every news organization is like that, so, but I really don't care what the Texas Tribune has to say about certain politicians because they have a tendency to be very left leaning, and I don't really understand why they feel the need to be frustratingly biased. It's like it's a news story. Cover the news story. That's all I'm gonna try, and that's what I'm gonna try doing. Is I'm also going to look at the biases of some of these news organizations just a little bit. I will always keep that in mind whenever I read news stories. So for this video, obviously, I'm going to be using a couple of Fox News sources, and yeah, I know how hyper biased they are. Trust me, they're not perfect by any stretch. Neither is CNN, so not gonna if you use both, then I guess you can kind of be balanced. I don't know, worth trying. And then of course national news. Why not national news? There's a lot of great political stories you can get into. The last 2 years have proven that you can have a lot of really good stories nationally. So I will talk about some of that stuff. I will probably incorporate some history. I will incorporate some observations I make about how the articles are designed. I will also make sure to keep things interesting. So let's get into these stories, shall we? For the first Sunday, I am pulling this off. So thank you for watching. All right, this first story, I'm gonna kind of combine it with the other state story I'm gonna talk about, which is heat wave. Um, the name of the story is Avoid Palo Duro Canyon Trail Usage. So, um, I live in West Texas, and it has been ridiculously hot. I don't think I have to say that a whole lot, just because it has been above 100 degrees consistently for the last 2 days now. It is right now 105. So yeah, of course, this is not going to be a fun weekend, but I imagine it's going to start cooling off pretty soon. So yeah, that's good there. The story itself, basically, it's a local story, and it's just talking about how the Randall County Sheriff's Office issued a statement avoiding the trails at Palo Duro Canyon. From personal experience, I can tell you every canyon in the Southwest is pretty deceptive when it comes to weather. Um, when it is above above canyons, usually it's cooler than it is inside the canyon itself. I know at the Grand Canyon you could have temperatures in the 70s on the rims, and then inside the canyon itself it could be upwards of 120. So that's personal experience. I've been to the Grand Canyon. I know that's the thing. Here, same thing. It can be 99 degrees on the rims, and then by the time you get into the canyon, it's 120. So that's what they're warning you guys. That's what they're warning everybody's about. Do not go hiking unless you want to. If you do, bring plenty of water. They've already had to do some rescues, so that's the local news. It's not. This isn't going to be the most interesting story, but local news. But the story kind of goes into another thing, which is drought. We've been having serious issues with drought. Everybody is in the Southwest right now. But yeah, our drought issues haven't really improved much. I'm hoping storm season kicks back up again because I feel like I'll have much better stories when we do storm season. Because there is a lot our media chooses to not advertise that happens. So, let's get into the next story, shall we? Alright, this next story. This is the first Fox News story I'm going to use. Again, I understand Fox News is conservative leaning, and I'm not going to say it's totally conservative because they are owned by Disney now, so there's that. I probably am simplifying the relationship between Fox and Disney, but 20th Century Fox and that entire conglomerate is now under them, and that does include Fox News. Fortunately, Murdoch's company did not get entirely hit with Disney's leftism, so they do still have that conservative leaning. So, there's that. The story itself is also drop news. The title of the story is Biden to get New Mexico wildfire briefing amid rage over Forest Service responsibility. So, to preface this story, back in April, there was a wildfire that broke out at Calf Canyon. This is not far from Las Vegas. Another fire also broke out at the same time at Hermit's Peak. This one was a prescribed burn. The day that they lit these fires, the wind was blowing about 75 miles an hour here in our area, and I'm definitely sure it was doing the same thing west of us in Las Vegas. So, right there, that should be cause for investigation, and that is what is going on. Grisham, their current governor, is called for the federal government to cover the entirety of recovering costs from Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon. So she wants an investigation, and she also wants them to essentially pay for the damages, which, good on her for actually making a decision that I think was pretty decent. I'm not a fan of her politics. I've never have been. Back in 2020, she closed down an entire city over very few COVID cases. So her handling of COVID was equally as disastrous as the other blue states. I will just say that right now. So yeah, it also kind of talks a little bit to what the federal government has been doing. I will bring this up a couple of times in the future, so I'm just going to give you the short version of my opinion on prescribed burns. I find them kind of suspicious given the fact that usually they happen with federal forces and usually they happen in areas that are populated. Not all the time, but they do happen in populated areas periodically. And it always makes me highly suspicious because you know they're populated. Why did you burn there? And also, why the heck did they burn on a day where it's 70 degrees? That's my question. But we will get more answers going forward. Obviously, there's investigations going on. I'm not sure I trust the government to investigate themselves because it's the government. Why do they feel the need to do that? I do not know. They should, but will they? That's always a good question, isn't it? So yeah, let's get to the next story, and then I will wrap things up after that. So this next story is, to me, kind of interesting because as a historian, I've always kind of been a little wary about people who constantly shout about renaming stuff because they're offended by the names of um, whoever they don't like. This will go both ways, by the way, because if a conservative starts asking for, say, I don't know an example. Just taking out a statue of John Lennon because they don't like him because of his communistic policies. I wouldn't support that. And the reason why I wouldn't support that is because it's still artwork. Whether people like it or not, it's still artwork. You don't have to agree with the person there. The same goes for those people who keep on calling for the removal of statues, such as a removal of statues and censoring of certain names. I don't get why people are so offended by stuff that they've decided to just straight up forget those people exist. It's like that's not how history is supposed to work. You're supposed to preserve information whether or not it's politically correct. That the fact that it's not politically correct should show you that you need to start preserving it so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. So, national story. This story comes out of Wyoming. Yellowstone National Park, renamed Old, and put this in quotes, offensive park, uh, old name. They, I hate the way, so this title doesn't make any sense to me. I'm going to read this title out loud because I'm having a hard time reading this. Yellowstone Peak renamed, old name, offensive park says. I can't read today, so I'm sorry. That made more sense as I read it out loud. The mountain was previously named for explorer Gustavus Dohn. Dohn was from what I read from this article, Dohn was a war hero who was a Union war hero. So that already I'm already kind of confused by. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting is they're renaming it because the guy was involved in a couple of battles with Native Americans following the Civil War. So 1870s and so during this 1870s there were constant small wars that our country kept fighting between Native Americans. I my opinion on both my slight opinion on both of the history of Native American wars with us is that it was more or less just tit for tat behavior, from what I can tell. I will have to do a lot more research, but both sides of the aisle do a terrible job telling the stories. So, because both sides of the aisle cartoonize one party over the other, and I think that's a great disservice to both parties involved in warring and stuff. I think if you're going to talk about war, you should talk about both sides of the aisle, objectors on both sides, supporters on both sides, and why those supporters existed, why the objectors existed. You have to talk about other stuff other than people hurting each other. And you have to talk about other stuff other than, oh, these group victimized this group. Sorry, I'm not going to go that route with people. I think that humans are humans. They have agency. Everybody has agency. Give people agency. I'm going to say agency one more time. So, there's that. But anyway, so basically, to kind of wrap up the story, the U.S. Board of Geographic Names voted unanimously 15-0 to rename the Wyoming Dohn Mountain. So Dohn, of course, I just mentioned who Dohn was. They just voted to rename it because people found it offensive. So, again, my opinion is this. I do not like the idea of censoring names because you don't like it. I don't like the idea of people renaming stuff over it being offended. It's like, I think we can learn from who these people are. I think that they can, if people support the renaming, then okay, by all means, go ahead. You voted to do it. However, the way that it is treated, I think, is not great from the left. I don't like how the left is obsessed with trying to sort of mold history into a view that is not balanced at all, while also accusing conservatives of not being balanced in their views as well. So, overall, my opinions are there, and yeah, that was the last story. So overall, that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm going to do going forward. I might try to make these videos shorter, obviously. I'm not going to do a giant long introduction again. My videos may still have tangents and stuff periodically. I might do that. If that's too distracting, I will gladly stop doing the tangents, script out everything, not do anything last minute. And thank you for watching, everybody. I'm glad that I'm getting the views, if I do get views, and Have a great rest of your day. Enjoy the week. I will be back next Sunday with more interesting news. Thank you. Bye.